विवेचनितं तस्मिन् समाधात इह समलीलाया विवेकवैराग्य विशुद्धचित्तं यहो स विवेकी तमहं नमामि। विवेकजानन्द निमग्नचित्तं विवेकदानैक विनोदशीलं विवेकभासा कमनीयकान्ति विवेकिनं तं सततं नमामि। ऋतं च विज्ञानं मधिश्रयाद्यन् निरन्तरं चादि मध्यान्तहीनं सुखं स्वरूपं प्रकरोति यस्य आनन्दमूर्तिं तमहं नमामि। सूर्यो यथान्दं हि तमो निहन्ति विष्णुर्यथा दुष्टजनांश्चिनाति तथैव यास्वाखिलनेत्रलोभं रूपं त्रितपं विमुखीकरोति तां देशिकेन्द्रं परमं पवित्रं विश्वस्य पालं मधुरं यतीन्द्रं हित्वा नृणां नरमूर्तिमन्त्रं विवेको आनन्द महं नमामि। विवेको आनन्द महं नमामि। नमः श्री अतिराजाय विवेकानन्द सुर Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamini Tapaharine.
अखण्डमण्डलाकारं व्याप्तं येन चराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। सर्वश्रुतिशिरोरत्नविराजितपदाम्बुजः वेदान्तामृतसूर्याय तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। चिन्मयं व्यापितं सर्वं त्रैलोक्यं सचराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। चैतन्यं शाश्वतं शान्तं व्योमातीतं निरञ्जनं विद्युदानकलातीतं तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। अनेकजन्मसम्प्राप्तकर्मेकनिदात्मनि आत्मज्ञानात्मिदानीं तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। मन्नाथ श्रीजगन्नाथो मद्गुरु श्रीजगद्गुरु तदात्मा सर्वभूतात्मा तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। ब्रह्मानन्दं परमसुखदं केवलं ज्ञानमूर्ति दुर्गातीतं गगनसदृशं तत्त्वमस्यादिलक्ष्यम् एकं नित्यं विमलमचलं सर्वधी साक्षिभूतं भावातीतं त्रिगुणरहितं सद्गुरुं तं नमामि। We bow down to the divine teacher in the form of Sri Ramakrishna, who imparts to the disciple the fire of self-knowledge and burns away the bonds of karma accumulated through many births. Vedamalamadhirachitam nirvilalpam sadasadatyadvedadidamekaswarupam Prabhudevigadishunyam nityamanandamuktam Vimalakaramaham Ramakrishnan bhajamaham Nirupamam atisukshmam nisprapanjam niriham Gaganasarishanisham sarvabhudadhuvasam Tribhunanikidasachidbrahmarupam varenyam Vimalakaramaham Ramakrishnan bhajamaham विदरितं अवतीर्णं ज्ञानभक्ति प्रशान्ति प्रणयकलितचित्तं जीवदुःखासहिष्णुं हृदसहजसमाधिं चिन्मयं कोमलाङ्गं विमलपरमहंसं रामकृष्णं भजामि। Meditation on Sri Ramakrishna. This Navarabrahman, ever established in his own nature, full of wisdom, self-possessed and self-lighted, eternal the very image of that Brahman, with pure bliss, shining ceaselessly, the lotus of the heart of everyone, one alone and without heart, pure and still, this Ramakrishna, Paramatma Supreme, we adore. Vedam Tanam Ram Bhavani Srividyam Shanmurtim Sakala Svedam Sarvasamrat Padatim Divyaya Tadamidam Jagatma Shaktiya Vishesha Gana Shakti Samodhamurtiya Tamam Digam Akila Devam Akashibhujya Yanatasma Vidadhava Subhanisam Visyam Prabhavamudiram Bhagavanananda Brahma Gadasna Hivatmaram Vedancha Satantika Abhiladhi Pariparananda Asayata Subhajayasya Madhikadudu Yasri Sriyam Sugadinam Bhavaneshu Alakshmi Bhavatmanam Radhyam Videshu Buddhi Siddhasana Gudajanak Pradhavasya Tam Bhavadasya Pariparananda Medhasini Vidya Kleshastasana Durga Sudhivasagarandrasanta Sri Kaidabhaya Yevi Tadadivasa Puri Kumeva Sasino Vidakta Udvis Tila Harisidini Asesha Vidoti Stais Tila Madinadiva Subham Vidasi Radik Kubhaya Prakti Sabut Samuddhikam Vidya Samasta Stavali Heda Yes Samasta Sadarajakatsu Tuyegaya Urinamambaye Bhakti Spirishtarigaya Padvati Eksham Shnitro Previshastanaga Tarayogasya Valaneta Javanamavit Tattvadvasanabhi Tattastida Kumbarivasinishu Vishweshwari Kumbarivasinishu Vishwatyagadhari Sri Vishwa Vishweshwarya Bodhi Bodhi Vishwasayari Vishwamurava Pranadhanam Shirukte Devi Vishwatyahari Vailokyavasinam Iti Vapanam Vadivalatam Pranadhanam Kasirakyori Devi Vishwatyahari Vailokyavasinam Iti Vapanam Vadivalatam Jayikudam Bujedi Jagannathana Vigraha Parabhyagadam Shakram Kudurkundamukam Vidyam Karavatma Padigash Padam Bodhisobhanam Prandaradharam Dhiram Vidya Paramibhushiram Prasannam Parnavama Mokshadam Vishamangala Sunadavama Bhagastham Bhaktan Vihavarim Om Vidhatme Rahika Shakti Ramakrishne Sthidakiya Tadavidya Sarubhavastam Saradam Pranamami. Meditation on Divine Mind. Let us meditate in the lotus of our hearts, the shining form of the Divine Mother in the form of Shada, revealed like the newly risen sun, bestowing blooms and fearlessness, tranquil, a beautiful face like a diligent smile, exceedingly pure, wise, and adorned in the veil of modesty. Let us meditate on the divine form of Sri Bhagavan, the Holy One. Prepared to recite as the cosmic power of Sri Ramakrishna, even as the burning power wells in fire. To that Divine Mother, Sri Sarada Devi, the embodiment of all knowledge, we offer our salutation. ध्याननिमग्नरूपं तस्मात् गौरविग्रहं योगिपुञ्जं समाश्रित्य देवकल्याणकारिणम् ॐ नमः श्रीविद्याध्याय विवेकानन्दसूरि सच्चित्सुखस्वरूपाय स्वामिने तापहारिणे Salutations to that King of Renonciation, Swami Vivekananda, the controller of passion, the seed, who is Satchidananda, itself, the spiritual preceptor, the remover of all mysteries. उज्ज्वलाङ्गं तरसमुगवराभिहस्तं प्रसन्नं पद्मासीनं समन्तास्पुरमहरणैः व्याहृतिवसनं विश्वाद्यं विश्वमिजं निकृपयहरं पञ्चवक्त्रं त्रिनेत्रं कैलासादिलिभं च शान्तकलया स्फूर्जडामण्डलम् आसादं त्रिनयनं विलासनाभ्यासः उद्गारन्दपुरन्दगानं विलसत्पाहं प्रसन्नानं कक्षादर्भुजङ्गमं वन्दे नमः पराय देवाय शङ्कराय पाणिलहिताय पद्मनाय दिविगल्पाय शान्ताय प्रगजङ्गादिने नमः अनर्थाय विशालाय सागरस्थाय योगिनाय शिवाय शिवाय परात्मने शिवाय हरिपरं गुणातीताय महादेवाय केवलाय कैवल्याय श्रीशाय निष्प्रकाय सूर्य नमः सोमभूषाय कल्याणाय धीराय जगदाय दिवाकराय मायाविदाय महासंतोषरूपाय नमो बुद्धस्वरूपाय परसेवकाय पूर्वजाय श्रीशाय ब्रह्मणे अनन्तमुक्ति निरक्षराय सूक्ष्माय स्वरूपाय परम प्रेम
Vivekananda. Selections from Chapter 2 of the Katha Upanishad. Peace chant. May Brahman protect us. May he nourish us. May we work together with great energy. May our study be vigorous and fruitful. May love and harmony dwell amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all. Nachiketa said, "Tell me of that which is beyond righteousness and unrighteousness, beyond cause and effect, beyond past and future time." Yama, the king of death, said, "I will tell you of that goal which all the scriptures proclaim, which all austerities aim at, desiring which men lead a life of self-control. In one word, it is Om. This Om is indeed Brahman. This indeed is the highest. Whoever knows this imperishable one obtains whatever he desires. This is the best support. This is the highest support. Whoever realizes this is adored in the highest heaven. The knowing self is not born, nor does it die. It does not arise from anything, nor does anything arise from it. Uncaused, eternal, everlasting, that ancient one is not destroyed when the body is destroyed. Subtler than the subtle, vaster than the vast, the Atman is hidden in the hearts of all. The desireless person, free from grief, with senses tranquil, sees that glorious Atman. On realizing that supreme, all-pervading self, who is bodiless yet dwells in all embodied beings, the realized soul grieves no more. The self cannot be attained by study of scriptures, nor by intelligence, nor by scholarship. The self is obtained by the one it chooses. The self reveals its own form. Self-realization cannot be had by the unrestrained or wicked person, nor even by one whose mind is restless. Who knows where it is, that self, which has priests and warriors for food, and death itself as a condiment? That ancient one is not destroyed when the body is destroyed. Subtler than the subtle, vaster than the vast, the Atman is hidden in the hearts of all. The desireless person, free from grief, with senses tranquil, sees that glorious Atman. On realizing that supreme all-pervading self is bodiless, yet
Om Shanti begin. I am going to read from a very interesting article published in one of the English magazines of our Ramakrishna order. The article is written by a ponderer. The name of the article is "Of the Seven Rishis, Who was Narendranath?" In Indian spiritual tradition, Shapta means seven, Rishis, Vedic seers, are highly revered spiritual beings believed to be eternally present. They are often identified with the seven stars called Great Bear in modern astronomy. Saptarishi Mandala is its Sanskrit equivalent. Swami Vivekananda is believed to be one of the seven Rishis. The background. Let us recall what is said in the great master, Sri Ramakrishna, the most authentic biography of Sri Ramakrishna. Quote, "One day I saw that through Samadhi my mind was going up by a luminous path, going beyond the gross world, studded with the sun, the moon, the stars. It entered first of all into the subtle world of ideas. The more it began to ascend to subtler and subtler strata of that realm, the more did I see beautiful ideal forms of deities existing on both sides of the path. It came gradually to the last extremity of that region. I saw a barrier of light there, separating the realm of the divisible from that of the indivisible. Leaping over it, the mind entered by degrees the realm of the indivisible. I saw that there was no more any person or thing there having a form, as if afraid to enter there, even the gods and the goddesses, possessing heavenly bodies, exercised their authority only over realms far below. But the very next moment I saw seven wise rishis having bodies consisting of divine light only, seated there in samadhi. I felt that in virtue and knowledge, love and renunciation, they had exalted even the god and goddesses, not to speak of human beings. Astonished, I was pondering over their greatness when I saw before me that a part of homogeneous mass of light of that abode of the indivisible, devoid of the slightest tinge of difference, became solidified and converted into the form of a divine child. Coming down to one of those rishis and throwing its soft and delicate arms round his neck, the divine child embraced him, and afterwards, calling him with its ambrosial words, sweeter than the music of the veena, made great efforts to wake him up from his samadhi. The rishi woke up at the delicate and loving touch and looked at the wonderful child with half-shut eyes. Free from waking, seeing his bright face full of delight at the sight of the child, I thought that the child was the treasure of his heart and that their familiarity was a matter of eternity. The extraordinary divine child then expressed infinite joy and said to him, "I am going, you must come with me." The rishi said nothing at that request, but his loving eyes expressed his heartily assent. Afterwards, looking on the child with loving eyes, he entered again into the samadhi. Astonished, I then saw that a part of the mind and body of the rishi converted into the form of a bright light came down to the earth along the river's path. Hardly had I seen Narendra for the first time, then I knew that he was the rishi. Shapta Rishi. Now the 7 rishis, which one was Narendranath, is a question related to this thesis. This writer looked into several authorities to have a fair idea of the names of the 7 rishis. Unfortunately or fortunately, we find different names in different sources of these 7 rishis. The Satapad Brahmana of Shukla Yajurveda says that the 7 rishis are Gautama, Bharadwaja, Vishwamitra, Jamodagni, Vashishta, Kashyapa and Atri. Krishna Yajurveda, in the Sandhya Vandana mantra, it says the 7 rishis are Oitri, Bhrigu, Kutsa, Vashishta, Gautama, Kashyapa and Angarisha. Mahabharata gives the 7 rishis name as Kutsa, Vishishta, Atri, Agastya, etc. Now Apte's Sanskrit English dictionary says these 7 rishis are Marichi, Oitri, Angarisha, Pulaha, Kratu, Pulasta and Vashishta. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad enumerates these 7 rishis as Gautama, Bharadwaja, Vishwamitra, Jamadagni, Vashishta, Kashyapa and Atri. And finally, in the Gospel, in the Sri Ramakrishna, the Great Master, translator Swami Sharadanandaji's footnote gives its own version of the 7 rishis as Shanaka, Shananda, Sanatana, Sanatkumar, Sana, Sanata Sujata and Kapila. With these variations in the names of the 7 rishis, it is very difficult to arrive at a conclusion. Based on the scriptural authority, this writer proposes that the rishi who came down to the earth as entreated by the extraordinary divine child could have been one other than Bhrigu. Curiously, only the Krishna Yajurveda gives Bhrigu's name as the Maharshi of Saptarshi Mandala, while the rest of the authorities cited here do not mention Bhrigu's name. However, we have fortunately one more authority. In Srimad Bhagavad Gita, wherein Sri Krishna declares among the Maharshis, he is Bhrigu. Strangely, except mentioning that he is in the form of Maharshi Bhrigu, no mention is made in the Saptarshi Mandala in Bhagavad Gita. It may be pertinent to ask why of this group of 7 rishis, Bhrigu has been cited in this essay. We can turn to another source of another great rishi. It said, a Maharshi is a completely realized soul. He can remain in ecstatic union with the Absolute in a meditative attitude or carry on materialistic activities with no loss of his divine perception. Wisdom is extolled as superior to action. The former denotes intuitive perception of the infinite, and the latter is the means of the divine realization. Most Maharshis remain in the inactive wisdom state, but Bhrigu was the master of both wisdom and activity. Hence, Lord Krishna cites him as the exemplar of liberated sage. Wisdom with the divine action is the balanced ideal most pleasing to God, for that is also his nature. And befittingly, Narendra, the future Swami Vivekananda, represented both the dynamic and the Swatik aspect of Maharshihood. There is also another reason why we may identify Bhrigu as one of the Saptarishis. Apte's Sanskrit dictionary gives the following account. On one occasion, when the sages could not agree as to which of the 3 goddesses, Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva, was best entitled to the worship of Brahmanas, the sage of Bhrigu was sent to test these gods. He first went to the abode of Brahma and on approaching him purposely omitted an obeisance. Upon this, the god reprehended him severely, but was pacified by apologies. Next, he entered the abode of Shiva in Kailash and omitted as before all tokens of adoration. The vindictive deity was enraged and would have destroyed him had not the sage conciliated him by mild words. According to another account, Bhrigu was coldly received by Brahma, and he therefore cursed him that he would receive no worship or adoration. And he condemned Shiva to take the form of a linga, the phallus, as he got no access to the deity who was engaged in the private with his wife. Lastly, he went to Vishnu, and finding him asleep, he boldly gave the god a kick on his breast, which at once woke him. Instead of showing anger, however, the god arose, and seeing Bhrigu, inquired tenderly whether his foot was hurt, and then began to rub it gently. He declared that he would cherish Bhrigu's footprint on his chest as the auspicious Srivasta. This, said Bhrigu, is the mightiest god. He overtops all by the most potent of all weapons, kindness and generosity. Vishnu was therefore declared to be the god who was best entitled to the worship of all. We find that just like Bhrigu testing the Trimurti, Narendra also tested Sri Ramakrishna along with other great men. It was his firm conviction that Sri Ramakrishna was the greatest, so he called Avatara Varishtaya. Before taking up this aspect of topic, we may try to know who that wonderful divine child could have been. Readers may refer to the Bhishma Parva of the great epic Mahabharata. That Markandeya Rishi, who was Chiranjeevi, the eternally living, saw before his eyes the entire universe is great deluge, and on the surging waters of Mahapralaya there floated a banyan leaf, a most beautiful male child, lying and sucking its right toe, holding it in his tender hand. This is expressed in a beautiful Sanskrit couplet. Koraro bindeno podaro bindam mukharo binde binibeshi shayantam batassa patrassa pute shayanam balam mukundam manasa smarami. Who else could have been that divine child except Bhagavan Sri Krishna, who is himself the Lord of all worlds? Krishnam Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is the God itself, and who came in this age as Sri Ramakrishna. Thank you.
From the work of Sister Nivedita, the Master as I saw him, describing Swami Vivekananda's visit to London in 1896. Many of the lectures which he gave during the year 1896 have since been published, and in them all the world may read his message and the interpretation by which he sought to make it clear. He had come to us as a missionary of the Hindu belief in the immanent God, and he called upon us to realize the truth of his gospel for ourselves. Neither then nor at any after time did I ever hear him advocate to his audience any specialized form of religion. He would refer freely enough to the Indian sects, or as I would like to call them, churches, by way of illustration of what he had to say, but he never preached anything but that philosophy which, to Indian thinking, underlies all creeds. He never quoted anything but the Vedas, the Upanishads, and the Bhagavad Gita. And he never in public, of course there's an exception here, he never in public mentioned his own master. Actually, he did mention twice at being urged to speak about his own teacher. He did lecture on Sri Ramakrishna twice. Many of the lectures which he gave during the year 1896 have since been published. He was deeply convinced, he never quoted anything but the Vedas, the Upanishads, and the Bhagavad Gita. He was deeply convinced of the need for Indian thought in order to enable the religious consciousness of the West to welcome and assimilate the discoveries of modern science, and to enable it also to survive that destruction of local mythologies, which is an inevitable result of all world consolidations. He felt that what was needed was a formulation of faith which could hold its adherents fearless of truth. Quote, "The salvation of Europe depends on a rationalistic religion," he exclaims in the course of one of his lectures, and again many times repeated. Quote, "The materialist is right. There is but one. Only he calls that one matter, and I call it God." In another and longer passage, he describes the growth of the religious idea and the relation of its various forms to one another. At first, he says, the goal is far off, outside nature and far beyond it, attracting us all towards it. This has to be brought near, yet without being degraded or degenerated, until when it has come closer and closer, the God of heaven becomes the God in nature, till the God in nature becomes the God who is nature, and the God who is nature becomes the God within this temple of the body, and the God dwelling in the temple of the body becomes the temple itself, becomes the soul of man. Thus it reaches the last words it can reach. He whom the sages have sought in all these places is in our own hearts. Thou art he, O man, thou art he. He always considered for his own part that his greatest intellectual achievement had consisted in his lectures on Maya. And it is only by reading these carefully that an idea can be formed of the difficulty of the tasks that he undertook in trying to render the conception in modern English. Throughout the chapters in question, we feel that we are in the presence of a struggle to express an idea which is clearly apprehended in a language which is not a fit receptacle for it. The word Maya is wrongly understood, says the Swami, to mean delusion. Originally, it meant something like magic, such as Indra through his Maya assumed various forms. But this meaning was subsequently dropped, and the word went through many transformations. A milestone in the series of conceptions that finally determined its meaning is found in the text, quote, "Because we talk in vain, and because we are satisfied with the things of the senses, and because we are running after desires, Therefore, we, as it were, cover this reality with a mist. End of quote. Finally, the word is seen to have assumed its ultimate meaning in the quotation from the Katha Upanishad. Quote, know nature to be Maya, and the mind, the ruler of this Maya, as the Lord himself. The Maya of the Vedanta, says the speaker, in its latest development, is a simple statement of facts, what we are and what we see around us. But that these words are not intended as the definition will be seen by anyone who reads the whole of the lectures on Maya for himself. It is there evident that the word does not simply refer to the universe as known through the senses, but also describes the tortuous, erroneous, and self-contradictory character of that knowledge. This is a statement of fact. Maya is a statement of fact, not a theory, says the Swami. That this word is as tantalus as hell, that we do not know anything about this universe, and yet at the same time we cannot say that we do not know. To walk in the midst of a dream, half sleeping, half waking, passing all our lives in a haze, this is the fate of every one of us. This is the fate of all sense knowledge. This is the universe. We see here, end of quote from Swami Vivekananda. We see here, as in many other of his interpretations, that an Indian word is incapable of exact rendering into English, and that the only way of arriving at an understanding of it is to try to catch the conception which the speaker is striving to express, rather than to fasten the attention on a sentence or two here or there. By Maya is thus meant that shimmering, elusive, half-real, half-unreal complexity in which there is no rest, no satisfaction, no ultimate certainty, of which we become aware through the senses and through the mind as dependent on the senses. At the same time, and that, quote, and that by which all this is pervaded, at the same time know that to be the Lord himself. In these two conceptions, placed side by side, we have the whole theology of Hinduism as presented by the Swami Vivekananda in the West. All other teachings and ideas are subordinated to these two. Religion was a matter of the growth of the individual, a question always of being and becoming. But such growth must presuppose the two fundamental facts and the gradual transference of the center of gravity, as it were, out of the one into the other, out of Maya into the self, self with a capital S. The condition of absorption in Maya was bondage in the Eastern sense. To have broken that bondage was freedom or mukti, or even nirvana. The path for the would-be breaker of bondage must always be by seeking for renunciation, not by striving for enjoyment. In this matter, the Swami was, as he said himself, only echoing what had been the burden of all religions. For all religions, Indian and other, have called a halt to the quest for pleasure. All have sought to turn life into a battlefield rather than a ballroom. All have striven to make man strong for death rather than for life. Where I think that Sister Nivedita, where I think that the Swami perhaps differed somewhat from other speakers, was in his acceptance of every kind of mastery as a form of renunciation. Towards the end of his life, I told him that renunciation was the only word I'd ever heard from his lips. And yet, in truth, I think that conquer was much more characteristic of him, for he pointed out that it was by renunciation, that is to say, by sustained and determined effort, by absorption in hard problems through lonely hours, by choosing toil and refusing ease, that Stevenson, for instance, invented the steam engine. He pointed that the science of medicine represented as strong a concentration of man's mind upon healing as would be required for a cure by prayer or by thought. He made us feel that all study was an austerity directed to a given end of knowledge. And above all, he preached that character, and character alone, was the power that determined the permanence of a religious wave. Resistance was to his mind the duty of the citizen, non-resistance of the monk. And this because for all the supreme achievement, for everyone, the supreme achievement was strength. Forgive, he said, when you also can bring legions of angels to an easy victory. While victory was still doubtful, however, only a coward to his thinking would turn the other cheek. One reads the same lesson in his master's story of the boy who for 20 years worked to acquire the power to walk on water. And so, said a saint, you have given 20 years of effort to doing that for which others give a ferryman a penny. The lad might have answered that no ferryman could give his passengers what he had acquired by 20 years of patient striving. But the fact remains that to these teachers, supremely sane, the world's art of navigation had its full value and its proper place. Years afterwards in Paris, someone approached him with a question as to the general theory of the development of Indian ideas on these subjects. Quote, did Buddha teach that the many was real and the ego unreal, while Orthodox Hinduism regards the one as the real and the many as unreal? He was asked. Yes, answered the Swami. And what Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and I have added to this is that the many and the one are the same reality, perceived by the same mind at different times and in different attitudes. Forgive, he said, when you also can bring legions of angels to an easy victory. While victory was still doubtful, however, our his thinking would turn the other cheek. One reads the same lesson in his master's story of the boy who for 20 years...
Here are a few paragraphs of Swamiji related to the topic of freedom. In one of the paragraphs, Swamiji writes, the human soul is eternal and immortal, perfect and infinite, and death means only a change of center from one body to another. The present is determined by our past actions and the future by the present. The soul will go on evolving up or reverting back, from birth to birth and death to death. But here is another question. Is man a tiny boat in a tempest, raised one moment on the foamy crest of a billow and dashed down into a yawning chasm the next, rolling to and from at the mercy of good and bad actions, a powerless, helpless wreck in an ever-rushing, uncompromising current of cause and effect? Just a little monk placed under the wheel of causation, which rolls on crushing everything in its way, and waits not for the widow's tears or the orphan's cry. The heart sinks at the idea that human life is so insignificant. Yet this is the law of nature. Is there no hope? Is there no escape? was the cry that went up from the bottom of the heart of despair. And it reached the Vedic sages. And the Vedic sages stood up before the world in a trumpet voice and proclaimed the glad tidings. Hear, ye children of immortal bliss, even ye that reside in higher spheres. I have found the Ancient One, who is beyond all darkness and delusion. By knowing Him alone will you be saved from death and birth again. Children of immortal bliss. What a sweet and hopeful name. Perhaps this is the essence of Swamiji's message to the West. The message from the Vedas, the children of immortal bliss. Allow me to call you, brethren, by that sweet name, the children of immortal bliss. The Hindu refuses to call you sinners. You are the children of God, the sharers of immortal bliss, holy and perfect beings. You are the divinities on earth. Sinners, it's a sin to call a man so. It's a standing libel on human nature. Come up of lines and shake off the delusion that you are sheep. Your souls are immortal, spirits free, blessed and eternal. There is another paragraph. Freedom is the song of the soul. That's the subtitle. A huge locomotive has rushed on over the line, the railway track, and a small worm that was creeping upon one of the rails saved its life by crawling out of the path of the locomotive. Yet this little tiny worm, so insignificant that it can be crushed in a moment, is a living something, while this huge locomotive, so big, so immense, is only an engine, a machine. You say the one has life and the other is only dead matter, and all his powers and strength and speed are only those of a dead machine, a mechanical contrivance. Yet the poor little worm which moved upon the rail track and which the least touch of the engine would have deprived of its life is a majestic being compared to the huge locomotive which has no life of its own. It's a small part of the infinite, that worm, and therefore it is greater than this powerful engine. Why should that be so? How do you know the living from the dead? The machine mechanically performs all the movements its maker has made it to perform. Its movements are not those of life. How can we make the distinction between the living and the dead? Then, in the living, there is freedom. There is intelligence. In the dead, all is bound and no freedom is possible because there is no intelligence as in the huge locomotive. This freedom that distinguishes us from mere machines is what we are all striving for. To be more free is the goal of all our efforts. For only in the perfect freedom can there be perfection. This effort to attain freedom underlies all forms of worship, whether we know it or not. The child rebels against the law as soon as it is born. Its first utterance is a cry, and it's a protest against the bondage into which it's born. This longing for freedom that comes from the child produces the idea of a being who is absolutely free. The concept of God is a fundamental element in the human constitution. In Vedanta, Satchidananda, existence, knowledge, bliss, is the highest concept of God possible to the mind. Is the essence of knowledge and is by its nature the essence of bliss. We have been stifling that inner voice long enough, seeking to follow law and quiet the human nature, trying to kill this human quest for freedom. But there is that instinct to rebel against nature's laws, which is an expression of the quest for freedom. We may not understand what the meaning is, but there is that unconscious struggle of the human with the spiritual, of the lower with the higher mind, and the struggle attempts to preserve one's separate life, what we call our individuality. Now we have just a few announcements. Our regular classes on Bhagavad Gita, this Friday, 7:30 classes in the old temple, have been suspended for some time. Now we will resume this class on Friday, the 24th of January. This coming, that is 24th of January, this Friday, we will resume our regular Bhagavad Gita class in the old temple at 7:30, 24th January. Also, we'll resume our Stanford classes from tomorrow onwards at 3:30 to 5 o'clock. In the afternoon, we will resume the Stanford classes tomorrow, every Sunday. Then we have the Upanishad classes in Sri Satya Narayana Temple in Milpitas. Those classes will resume from 25th January onwards from 3 to 4:30 p.m. the second and fourth Saturday of every month. And again, we have Swami Brahmananda's birthday on January the 26th, Sunday, 7:30. We will have no Sunday lecture in the morning, but we will have puja at 7:30, a short puja in the evening on 26th. So thank you, namaskar. Now we will have flower offerings by devotees after it is ready.